we got a lot of information from this. A lot of this information is through the work of Ray Parks and his wife, who were doing some research for the Presbyterian Church. So Jim discovered that it was in the Bits and Pieces, I think it's called, in the Charlestown Library, and we were able to use a lot of that information here. And then, of course, we inserted a lot of Black history in this book, too. Sorry to say it's not out of print, but we're out of reprint money. So we'll reprint it later on with some additions. But latter half 1800, there's a lot of activity happening here in Charlestown. We had in 1873, the governor was approving an act that only allowed white males, 21 and over, to serve on juries. So they're knocking out white women too at the same time. In 1875, the Civil Rights Act, and something happened here in Charlestown that maybe we don't know anything about, but it was, after that Civil Rights Act was passed, there was a black boy who got some tickets some kind of way, went up to the Opera House and walked, not the Opera House, but Charles Washington Hall, walked right straight down to the front row and sat down and took a seat. And everybody wondered what in the world was going on. Well, they escorted him out like they escort people out of some of our political rallies. In 1881, Frederick Douglass spoke about John Brown at Historic College, and he was one of the ones who, most prominent people in the United States who visited Jefferson County. And of course, in 1887, J.R. Clifford admitted to the bar here in West Virginia. And then a strange thing happened in 1892. Hamilton Hatter from out in Myerstown became the first black male to receive a party nomination for public office in West Virginia. And I think that was for the House of Delegates. Very, 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 very important. And of course, we know that Hamilton Hatter went on to become first principal of Bluefield State College, followed by Mr. Sims, also of Myerstown. So that's another thing. We've had 3 people from Jefferson County and Historic College to serve as principals of higher education institutions in the state. Hamilton Hatter, Mr. Sims, and I forget the man, Mr. Hill from Shepherdstown. And when I was at West Virginia State College, I didn't know. I knew that Hill, we always called it Hill Hall, but I never knew that that particular person came from Shepherdstown. Okay, I'm going to jump now to World War I, and I hope you don't mind. I'm all outside of the time frame that you gave us, but we'll go to World War I, and the government felt it was necessary to have, of course, soldiers, so they selected a white, black young men. There would be a group of blacks drafted, a group of whites drafted. They all might go to the same training camp, but they were going under corporals. That was just somebody temporarily that was in charge. But that was a carryover from the Civil Wars, which we see a lot of the black troops serving in those particular units. Funny thing happened in Jefferson County during World War I. Over in Johnsontown, there was a black Red Cross auxiliary group that made garments for the people over in Belgium. Now that seems strange, but they had this auxiliary that did that. At the same time, there were groups here in Charlestown, the horse show, Charlestown Horse Show, which was black. I was raising money for also the war effort in Europe. We fast forward to 1938. Of course, we had Page Jackson High School established. We've already talked about that. It was countywide. And then we were right back into World War II. And we had the same draft procedures, that blacks were being drafted, whites were being drafted separately. They went and served in the war, and they returned back to Jefferson County. And what did they return to? Segregated housing, segregated accommodations. They got jobs at brass foundry. They returned to the racetrack. A lot of them returned to do work on the farms. You had domestics. You had people working in orchards and farms. And you also had Storr College. And one of my friends here went to Storr College at night. Of course, he wasn't in World War II, but that's what Storr College was doing back right after World War II. But as far as the, and there were a lot of veterans going to Storr College. Many of them became our teachers, our leaders in the community. But as far as veterans concerned, they couldn't go to the parks, couldn't go to the restaurants, barbershop schools, hospital, and of course service organizations. I think George talked about the American Legion, but there was a group of World War I veterans who decided to charter a post here in Jefferson County in 1929, and the name of their post was Green Copeland, post number 63. Now Green and Copeland, for Doug, will remember that Green, Shields Green and John Copeland were two of the John Brown raiders. Two of the blacks came to Harper's Ferry with John Brown. And it took a whole lot of nerve and courage for these World War I veterans in 1929 to name American Legion Post after these guys, because there was nothing in Jefferson County but anti-John Brown. You didn't mention John Brown. Of course, a lot of people and a lot of black people named their children John Brown, and of course Franklin Delano Roosevelt and things like that. But John Brown was not a favorite person here in Jefferson County. But the black veterans thought that these two persons were so important that they would name that post after Shields Green and John Copeland. We fast forward to the Korean War, and by that time President Truman had integrated the military. In 1954, I was in Japan, and I still have the Stars and Stripes newspaper that announced the segregation of schools by the Supreme Court. But West Virginia just didn't get it. Rather, they were very, very slow on desegregating. They wouldn't comply with the court's decision. And in 1956, seeing that Jefferson County School Board was not going to comply with the highest court of the land, an organization was formed called the Charlestown Civic League. And there were quite a few people who joined the league. They had, the emphasis was desegregation of the school, but they also wanted to segregate Jefferson Memorial Park, of course, public accommodations, hotels, hospitals, hotels and restaurants, places like that. And I think you ought to know now that the Charles Washington Hall belonged to the city, but nothing black would go in that front door. You always had to go in the back door to get your hamburgers or whatever. And that included veterans. They did that. Jefferson County, not Jefferson County, but Charlestown Civic League was very, very important because NACP had not been active during that particular period. But they did a lot. They did a lot to segregate Jefferson County. In 1963, the NACP was chartered here in Jefferson County, and it was felt that the Civic League had no national body to go to, so that was the reason for the chartering of the NACP. And the two organizations together did a whole lot to segregate things here in Jefferson County. I've already told you about the hospital was segregated, the movie theaters were segregated, of course the park was segregated, the banks of course had nothing, no clerks or anything like that except for janitorial staff. Barbershops, county government was totally white, city government was totally white, the school situation totally white. The NACP and the Civic League joined together when they found out that the Red Cross didn't find it out, but they said the Red Cross was running a sewing program at the park. Of course, blacks could go to the park. So both organizations wrote a letter to the National Red Cross and told them the Red Cross comes up here or communicates with the Jefferson County Red Cross and says why. And of course, they said it's a private park. I don't think there were any membership cards or anything like that, but if you were white, that was your membership card. You go to the park. So they make a long story short, the Red Cross, National Red Cross, told the Jefferson County Red Cross, you're running this program at this park, and you're not allowed, swimming program at this park, and you're not allowing blacks to participate in it. You aren't going to do it under the Red Cross program. So some of our prominent folks here on the Red Cross board said, oh yeah, well, we'll give them a swimming program. We'll bus them over to Shepherd College. So the National Red Cross said, no, you won't either. They'll swim the same place the white kids learn swimming. So we got over that. I don't think, Jim, we talked about Boy Scouts up at Rockin', Boy Scout camp up in Gore, Virginia. But when we were in Boy Scouts in the latter 40s, the white troops would have that big complex all summer. And then Boy Scouts from Charlestown, Hoppers Ferry, Shepherdstown, Winchester, Front Royal, Burrville got 1 week, I think, at Rockingham Camp. So I think later on, National Boy Scouts came in and they stopped that. But we had to fight to even step foot in the Charlestown Library. And after that was open, there were a lot of organizations here, black organizations, that gave books, magazines, things like that to the library. Maybe they aren't up there by now, but we gave Ebony magazine and several other magazines to the library. Now, we talk about desegregation of schools. But in my mind, I think another one of the most devastating things that ever happened to black education in Jefferson County was institution, what they call the phasing program. Phasing was a program in which they would have about 5 categories in which students were placed in. Now you guessed it already. The blacks were placed in the lower phases. And of course, that had a later effect. But the NAACP went to HEW and said, look, this is in-school segregation. They find all the blacks in the lower phases. HEW agreed with us and said, look, you better do something about that. Now, this wasn't the first time that HEW, of course, had come in and told Jefferson County Schools they had to do something different. Because HEW, that was ones that forced this county school system to integrate in 1965. And it was through the efforts of NAACP, Civic League wrote letters and said, look, this is what they're doing. They're continuing to segregate. So HEW wrote to the Board of Education and said, you keep it up, we're going to withdraw $50,000, which was their contribution at that time, to Jefferson County. So quickly the Board of Education realized that that would tear up the school system here, and that was a reason that they desegregated the schools, because HEW had said, if you don't get any money from the federal government. And of course, a lot of that was based on persons that were employed. The federal government had children, and I think that's through some process they figured all of that in. Another big troubling spot we've had was Shepherd University. We went to Shepherd University, wanted to know why. The faculty wasn't being desegregated. George and Jim went to Shepherd. George used to always talk about doing lunch hours. A group of them would get together, go out in their cars, and eat lunch in their cars. I don't know why, but they did that because they felt more comfortable eating in their cars and together, probably than in the cafeteria. You might also want to know that we had our differences with Shepherd College as far as faculty and as far as students for a number of years. In fact, Shepherd College, of course, I think everybody knows, lost their accreditation. And it was because of the teacher education program as far as the teaching about black student education, also about kids that might be handicapped. So the accrediting agency said, no, we're going to stop. So Jefferson County NAACP and FAIR group out of Shepherdstown did a protest on Shepherd College campus. And we wrote letters, protested, and told a lot of school systems, don't hire teachers from the Shepherd College education program. Don't hire them because they aren't prepared. Don't know how many believed us or took us up on that, but it was a fact that they weren't prepared to teach in integrated school systems. You might also want to know that the Jefferson County NAACP was the first ones to introduce police review board in Jefferson, discussion of it in Jefferson County. And this came from the old Civic League, which had met with the Charlestown City Council when it was up between Russ's Fire Hall and New Central Restaurant. That's where they used to have their council meetings. But we would go to the city council and ask for a police review board. Of course, each time we'd be turned down. So that happened during that particular period. We still aren't finished. We still are not finished as far as segregation and civil rights here in Jefferson County. But I'll stop with that and invite any comments.
Well, folks, you know, you can talk about civil rights all day here, and you can really show what's going on. You know, and lots of times, I guess you're sitting here and you're amazed at some of the stuff he tells you that really existed then and existed now. Talk about the Boy Scouts. Let's talk about the Boy Scouts, for example. You mentioned the Boy Scouts, right?
Yeah.
I belonged to the Boy Scouts in 1950, very well. I belonged to Troop 31 and the Second National Jamboree was being held in Valley Forge, and I was selected to go. We talked about self-help. All these fraternal organizations came together and raised money so I could go to Valley Forge. And we went together as a group from Jefferson County, black and white. I was only black. And so we went down in front of the courthouse, and you know, I was with this group. I was part of the troop, going there as a group. But however, once I got in Valley Forge, they took me aside and said, "You can't stay with this group." They put me down with the group from down in Salisbury, in Maryland. So I spent 2 weeks with them. And then they come back, they brought me back up with the group from Charlestown, Jefferson County, to come back home. And this took place with the Boy Scouts. And I guess we also think about civil rights and what happened. Take, for example, Stowe College. Very few people know the true story of Stowe College. They say Stowe College closed because of the Brown versus Board. That is really not the true story. The true story, as you really check into it, there was a person put on the board of Stowe College to close Stowe College, make sure it did not survive. This man made that statement, this lawyer has written, he was there to close Stowe College. The state was only given $20,000 to store anyhow. And they said that you don't need Stowe College here, we got Shepherd there. But look what you got. You got Bluefield down there, they survived. You got West Virginia State down there, and there were 2 other colleges at the same time. But Stowe did not close because of that. They closed because certain people in this community and the state did not want Stowe College to survive.
Can we ask who? Historical fact?
Well,
Are they dead?
He's dead, but his family says he's a lawyer.
Okay.
But it's documented in some places. Read that book that Don Burke wrote. At the same time, the reason why Stowe College could have survived because there were 2 proposals given to this board. One of them was from Alderson Brothers, that they would incorporate Stowe College as part of their college. They turned them down, but however, most of the investment and money and everything went to Alderson Brothers from Stowe College. The other one was a group out of D.C. They said, we're going to come in here and we're going to take over this college and we're going to put it in with part of our schooling. And we'll keep Stowe College going. And they had the money and everything to do it. And the board still refused to do it. 2 people filed suit against it 1 year after it closed. And went to D.C. They filed in the federal court. They filed in court in D.C. District Court. However, the district refused to hear it and they kicked it back to the state. And then that was it. But that's the whole story behind Stowe College when you talk about civil rights. That's the reason why Stowe College no longer exists. Lots of things happen, you know, in the area of civil rights. Even the banks, you know, the banks had always discriminated against blacks. Up until recently, I would almost say, you know, I'll give you another good example. You know, you talk about civil rights. There are 4 of us. Tolbert, myself, Harold Stewart, and Nathaniel Downing. 4 veterans. 4 of us that worked for the federal government, had a good job, pretty stable. We go to the bank to borrow $5,000. We had a contract. First, we had a contract with the federal government to produce the item. The federal government gave us a contract. All we got to do is get the item produced. We got someone to produce the item for us. We got the $5,000 in the bank in advance. About a week after we got the $5,000 article in the paper concerning this person that was developing our stuff. He got some kind of problem, not that bad. 2 days after, we got a call. They want their $5,000 back. Yeah, we had this $5,000 for about 6 months, and yet they want that money back. You know, just like that. And I have personally gone to the bank at times to borrow money. And let's say, for example, they say, okay, you can get it at 6 or 7%. I have gotten telephone calls at night from someone in the bank and say, don't take that, because I know other people getting for 5%. And I have, not just myself, I know other people going through this very same thing. So, you know, it has been a really rough when talking about civil rights here in this county. And there has been killings here that has been going on no action taken against it. One of the most famous ones is the Sewell case over in Shenandoah Junction. That's happening in NAACP got started. A master shot a World War II veteran in the car. Shot him dead and let him laid out in the street, and the milkman had his wife in it because she ran away and saw it. They had an inquest, and I'm sure that the magistrate would have been convicted. What happened was, you understand, they paid the man's wife off, and so she never came back until justice was testified. You'd be surprised at the things that have happened here in this county, and the threats that have been received in the county. So lots of times people think that civil rights is, you know, is not much of a problem here in the county, but it has been. And to a certain extent, it still is in some areas.
I
know a perfect example. We got a copy, a couple of years ago, maybe we'll talk about the Sea Girl. Remember the problem?
You bet.
I understand this one girl was selected as the Miss Jefferson County or Miss something. She was selected as the first Miss Jefferson County. And it just so happened that after she was selected, the judges did not realize she was black. She was white. She was not allowed to ride in the parade because she came to us complaining about it. They rode in the Winchester parade, Apple Blossom parade, but she was not allowed to ride as the queen. She had to ride back as one of the attendants. We got all the paperwork and everything on it, but she was the first one. Her name was Bonnie C.
Where was that?
That has to be, they still have the contest every year, but she was the first one. This had to be about 20 years ago, 25 years ago.
Well, I had a Bonnie C, I think, when I taught here years ago, so it has
That's
been
right,
that long.
yeah. They didn't realize she was white.
30 years.
We're not allowed to ride in the Christmas parade or the Apple Blossom parade. We got the paperwork on it. We had to file a complaint on her behalf. And I understand that we're still not working out of it.
We've also, as far as civil rights is concerned, made kind of a copy of a lot of the news articles, letters, everything else that we've run into throughout the years. And we still have a whole lot more to add to it. I don't know if we'll live long enough to add another set like this. And also our Jefferson County African American Black Book. Again, not out of print, but we need to reprint those and do some more additions. But a lot of that is contained in the books that we've discussed, at least we talked about this morning.
I guess, you know, just to be clear, you know, we talk a lot of stuff maybe negative when it comes to race and so forth, but there have been lots of good people on both sides, white people that have really helped in this race relationship as far as civil rights. For example, in education, you know, you couldn't have found a better person as far as black education as a man who was Shepherd College by the name of Ray Harris. You know, we had a problem with Shepherd College. Ray Harris was very friendly when it came to dealing with black people. Also, we talk about in the community, you couldn't find a better person to deal with the black community as Ollie Blessing. You know? she came up in the black neighborhood, she helped out, she also helped in the teaching and everything. So therefore, we're not really saying it's black and white, there is good people on both sides. And they have helped out in education, they helped out in the fraternal group, and they helped out in civil rights. Some of the top civil rights leaders have no right, that really helped us out.
Didn't you say, George, that membership in your local chapter of NAACP is 35%?
Yeah, the Jefferson County NAACP chapter is 35% white. 35% white. We got white officers, we got white sheriffers. Matter of fact, we just went to the school, the town council today, and the chairperson of the political faction is Mary Lawrence Gannon. We had a white vice president. And what people don't realize that there are a couple of NAACP chapters in this country that is all white. So a black person living in town, but they're all white. Because what the NAACP is fighting for is the same thing they're fighting for. And I guess one of the most discriminated groups right now is white females.
There's a significant difference in the composition of the population of the county today as compared to the time period after the Civil War. After the Civil War, 30% of the population of Jefferson County was African American. And today it's significantly less than that. Is there something that happened? Is there a time period when there's a significant out-migration that you're aware of?
Hey, let me tag along question. I've always wondered why Middle Way had a big African-American community for quite a while, 2 churches and all that, and you can barely even find the cemeteries now. It's almost like they just evaporated for some reason. I wonder if it's related to what Doug said.
Well, didn't you say that a lot of people left during the Depression, or losing their farms, and left after the Depression, like no one farm?
Yeah, they got a lot of left the farms and homes and things like up in Jamestown area, you know.
And better opportunity. As far as employment, they can get jobs elsewhere faster because we get them here. You know, I had to work out of town. My daughter had to work out of town, so they couldn't get a job here. You talk about blacks leaving Middleburg area, Middleway area. Look at Harper's Ferry. Harper's Ferry had one of the largest black populations in the county, and there was more blacks with college degree in Harper's Ferry than anywhere in the state. And now I don't think you can find black people living in Harper's Ferry properly.
I was interviewing people in the 80s, and they told me also that in the Depression, if you're black, you had to go to the cities to find work. But while you were away, you didn't know that you owed taxes, and they'd auction off your property when you were gone.
Right?
I wonder about those teachers that you had at Page Jackson. What happened to them after immigration?
They were absorbed into the schools.
Were they treated? They probably weren't treated like they deserved to be.
Say it again.
I imagine they didn't receive the treatment that they should have received, given their